We have with us this afternoon a legend in Mississippi, Mr. Sonny Hill. And I've been asked to tell you a little bit about him before we get started. Mr. Hill is from Itta, Mississippi. And he has taught band either as a band director or a private teacher for a mere 64 years. In fact, he started band in 1937-38 school year. And can I tell him you were a twirler at that time? Okay, I'm not going to tell. We do have a picture, right. His first band director, many of you know of or know, and that was Joe Barry Mullins. First band director was Joe Barry Mullins, and what I found out from Mr. Hill, he has started several band programs in Mississippi back in the day. A few of them are still going, and I'll mention a couple. He started the band program at Madison Ridgeland, and we know where that has gone today. He also, at the same time, started the Flora band program. He spent 2 hours at each place a week, starting both of those programs. He also started the band program at Jackson Academy, as well as many others. Mr. Hill, I've always known as a trumpet player, fabulous teacher of all the instruments, but his first instrument was the drums. He was a drummer. Then he got into cornet and had no lessons until he got into college. Mr. Hill went to LSU and played professionally on the road with several jazz orchestras for 2 years. And I first met Mr. Hill in 1970 when I was a freshman at Mississippi State and was the drummer for the jazz band. And Dr. Kent Seals always told us as we were getting ready for the Mississippi State Jazz Band Festival, he said, "All right, ladies, we got to be ready for this band from Flora. They're coming up, and this Sonny Hill guy, he's been on the road with Stan Kenton, with all these guys, and he knows what he's doing, and they're going to show us up." So those of you that know Dr. Seals know how he would say that. So we were ready for the Flora Jazz Band. Of course, they came in and played. I don't know if they have grade levels in jazz music or not, but they were sixes at least, and he played all the original stuff that the big bands played. So he has for you, and I'm going to pop some questions, and then he has a 17-page golden document of best practices that he has shared with everybody, thanks to Mr. Rowan, Mr. Pickering, who have emailed, or this will be emailed to each of you so that you'll have a hard copy. So let's give a good welcome to Mr. Sonny Hill. I'm supposed to pop some questions to him, and he has some things prepared, so we don't know where this will go, but we'll try it and see. But some of the things we want to hear from you are some best practices that a teacher could learn from and benefit from you, either as on the podium or in a private lesson type situation, any instrument. So talk a little bit about that and get into anything that you have prepared here. You've got one war story allowed.
Well, thank you for having me here. When David asked me if I would do a clinic, I always thought a clinic was somewhere you went if you were sick and you needed help, or you were some kind of an authority on something. And I hope I'm not sick, and I know I'm not an authority. I've just done what you do longer under different circumstances. A lot of different circumstances. My highest salary was $5,000 a year teaching. That's true. My Social Security check has proved that. People think I'm kidding, but that is actually the highest salary I've ever made. So consequently, I had to teach private lessons for $3 a lesson in the afternoons after school to try to make a living. And I tried to get a raise every year from my band director, my superintendent. He said, "Oh, Sonny, aren't you doing good on that 5,000?" I said, I'm doing great on it, but my wife and family are not doing too good. And but anyway, he upped me about $200 or $300 a year there for a while. And but anyway, I think about you people that are band directors now and the salary that you get, and you probably, some of y'all are still having a hard time even with that salary. And then some of y'all are married to band directors, and I can't imagine two salaries that big, being able to teach in Mississippi. But you have one of the most important jobs in school, if not the most important. Of course, we know all about sports and all the rah-rah you get out of that, teamwork and all that, but it's nothing to compare to a band room and what you go through in a band room and what you're teaching these kids. When I watch y'all rehearse, some of y'all in these bands, and watch the intensity and the knowledge that you put forth in front of these kids, and the music that they play that they would never ever have known about if it hadn't been for you, it's a miracle in taking place, and you're doing a great job with that. And it's something that if you live long as I have, I'm teaching kids, from the 40s to the 50s to the 60s. Great grandkids are some of the people I started teaching earlier, and they all have stories to tell me that their parents told them about me that I have no clue where they heard that. It was like, even my latest students can tell me things that I did and said to them, and I just swear I could never have said that or done that, but they all know that's what happened, and they said that's what happened. But to be a good band director, I'm supposed to have 30 minutes to tell y'all how to be better than you are, and there's no way I can do that in 30 minutes. That's the reason I wrote out a whole bunch of this stuff here, and I hope you can get a copy of it. Let me ask you, how many of you yourself teach private lessons, 1 a week lesson to your students? How many people do that? Or how many of you have outside people who come in and teach private lessons regularly, not every now and then, but as a regular thing at your school? All right. I've got some things here, thoughts about that. Teaching privately is one-on-one, basically. You get a lot more done in a short time. I know that I really admire you band directors, and I've done this myself. And like the parents way back, you'd say, well, how can you teach a clarinet, a cornet, a trumpet, a trombone, a saxophone, all at the same time, like you do at band practice? I know y'all have probably heard that too. Which brings me to this idea. I think it would be a great idea to have one day, one practice time a month that you can invite a certain number of parents to come sit in your band room and listen to what you do. It would amaze them. LBK, I've always thought another thing too, that if you're not already doing this, there should be a course in college on Mississippi band director history, just like it is for American history, Civil War, civil rights, everywhere else. If y'all had a clue what all has taken place in this state, from far back as I can remember, little towns like Marks, Mississippi. Anybody know where Marks is? Can you believe that they played the Cotton Fugue in D minor at Marks? Y'all know that tune? Bach? If you don't know it, that's okay. It's unbelievable. They played that. Jimmy Ferguson. You ever heard of Jimmy Ferguson? He was a band director there, and he went on to Ole Miss, became band director there, and retired at the University of Alabama. He's from Columbus. I've got stories after stories about people who've gone ahead of you, who know all about, I know what all about they did, and then a lot more before that. Way back when I started in band, I came on up through high school, the Urbana band stopped, and I had to go to Greenwood. I used to hitchhike 9 miles to go to school in Greenwood. I had Roy Martin was my band director. Roy Martin started the Delta Band Festival. He started the Lions All State Band. He was an unbelievable psychologist along with his musical talents. For instance, he needed tuba players. He bad needed tuba players. He went to the sophomore, junior, senior classes at Greenwood and told them he wanted to find out who had the highest grades in the class because he had a job for them to do because it took so much brain, a little bit extra brains to be able to do this particular job. He wanted to play tuba in the band. And about 6 boys in the back held up their hands. So he said, all right, come on with me. He ended up with about 15 tubas. Then he had to come back and tell them a story. He didn't have 6 tubas in the band to use. So he had to tell the other 8 or 9 that it also took brains to play the baritone and the trombone or whatever else they did. But I mean, things like that, just common sense stuff that he got done, it was just incredible. And that's just one person. And there was a book that's been written about 4 early band directors. Simon Koeman, who was a Dutch man born in Holland, who came to Clarksdale. Roy Martin, who came to Greenwood in 1920s as band director. Henry Walmsley, who came to Starkville High School and ended up at Mississippi A&M, Mississippi College, Mississippi State. And who was the other one? Who was the other one? One more. I think, Pulo. Pulo was Italian, born in Italy, came to Jackson Central. These guys were like generals. I mean, you did what they said, you did it quick too, or you're in trouble. Pulo was known for taking a clarinet out of a girl's hand and just throwing it up against the wall because she didn't have a reed on her horn. She was faking playing. I mean, that's a long story. It's all documented in this book. And I think you read that. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can't get away with now, but back then you could. You know, we used to ride home. Girls would need a ride home after school. We'd say, come on, I'll take you, hon. You don't do that anymore. William Ravelli. How many of y'all heard of William Ravelli? Big band director in Michigan. He was like John Philip Sousa of his day. Roy Martin and him were good buddies. He came down to Itabena one time with William Ravelli. William Ravelli gave him a demonstration. He had the first trombone player to come down and lay us down on the podium on his back. He was going to show us how to breathe. He put a folder on his thing that day. Let me see you breathe. And the trombone player went, he said, no, son, you breathe down here. He had the folder come up this way. Now, this is William Ravelli from Michigan. I mean, he was unbelievable. There's a billion stories that need to be told and written down somewhere about all this stuff. How many of y'all knew that when you go to band contest, that you used to have to do sight reading, marching, band, all at the same time for contests. Each band had to start at the Capitol Street at the depot and march a parade all the way up. This was all in the day. Each band had solo and ensemble contest. All this was in one day. And it was listed in the program. I've got some of the programs. It lists all the programs. The kids had solo and ensemble, a parade, had the sight read, march, and at night, everybody sat in the stands, and they called out all the ratings. And I was sitting by Mr. Martin one time, and this one band was really bad. And Jimmy Ferguson and I were sitting together, and they came by, they marched and everything, and Mr. Martin said, he said, everybody's doing the best they can. And Jimmy looked at me like, man, this guy is nuts. That guy couldn't be doing the best he can. But it took us years to realize what he was talking about. Everybody has different abilities, different talents. Nobody wants to put a bad band on the field or on the stage. Everybody is doing the best they can do. And if you have anything, you don't believe that, I think you're making a mistake too, because they really are. None of y'all in here want to have a bad band or a bad concert or a bad performance. That reminds me of another story, but I'll tell that later on. But anyway, I'm getting off track, right? Private lessons. If you're thinking about it, or if you're doing it, or if you need to do it, is it showing up there with the thing?
They'll get a copy of this.
Okay. They can only work successfully in a band program where the directors are highly supportive. If the band director there doesn't want private lessons, or if it doesn't believe in them or believe in it, whatever, you shouldn't be there. The downside of that is the student thinking that a 30-minute lesson per week is a cure-all for improving his playing. Not true. You only spend 30 minutes with them, but they practice the rest of the time. The teacher must learn all he can about the instrument he's teaching as well as the literature. So you need to learn it all. Back when I started in band, there was only about 2 or 3 bands in the state that had the second band director in the staff. Meridian, Jackson Central, and one up north somewhere, Clarksdale maybe. But so everybody did that whole thing by himself. The marching, the beginners, the high school, the junior high, everything. One person did it all. So you learn a lot when you have to do that, when you have to do it by yourself. The band director and the private teacher should discuss in advance the type of instrument, mouthpiece, reeds, and so forth that will be used in the band program. In all cases, the private teacher should go along with the band director's decisions about these matters unless the private teacher can convince the director otherwise, because you are working for him. You're working for the band director. You want his band to be as good as it can be, starting with the kids. It's all kinds of stuff here. I don't want to get too much into that. Anyway, private lessons are very, very important. They help the band director a lot and the band. Sight reading tips. That's the next page I've got here. Anytime a kid is playing a band number or anything else, you spend a lot of time working on 3 numbers. All right, I've got to tell you this story about Joe Barry Mullins. When we went to contest at Edavina one time, came down to Jackson. You know how you set up the band? You bring the chairs out for each band's different, each number stands. He had them take all the stands off the table. No director stand. No, not a stand on the stage. We played the whole concert without any music. Well, one of the judges tore him up about that. He said, "Man, you must not do anything but spend all year working on 3 numbers," which was just the opposite of him. In his defense, he worked hard on everything. He was an incredible band director. And we found out right quick that the judges didn't like that kind of thing. But that was just one judge. Which brings me to another thing. When Pulo, the band director of Jackson Central, it was the biggest school in Mississippi. They had the best baseball team, best football team, best everything, best band. He was retiring. He moved into Florida, and I ran into him on Capitol Street. He had a stack of judges' sheets right here, and I looked at one of them, and he said, "This is one of the finest bands I've ever heard." It was signed by Henry Fillmore. That tells you a lot about Mississippi bands from way back at that period of time. The biggest problem for most students auditioning is chair position or clinic, or the all-state band is usually sight reading. You can prepare scales. You know they're going to ask scales. You can prepare your solo. You know they're going to ask the solo, but you have no earthly idea what they're going to do on sight reading. So you have to learn how to do that the best you can. All right, I've written out 2 little examples of sight reading. One of them is written just plain notes, rhythms, and I have up here that 95% of the students would probably play this right. Well, maybe not that many. Then I took the same notes again, put some dynamics in it, changed the time signature, put some retards, put railroad tracks, high tempo, retard, formatos, cut time, 2/4 time. It's all the same thing. And I call that major tricks that you're looking for to the kids. 'Cause I mean, it's the same thing, note for note. The rhythms look the same, but it's all this other stuff in there that is different. It makes it more difficult to play, even though they may know the rhythm. Then I made a list of all of the major tricks, I call them, to teach the students to look out for. Key signature change, time signature change, retard, rallentando, fermata, DC alfine, just the usual stuff that you usually see, including double sharps, double flats, all that sort of stuff, accidentals. And when you teach a kid to sight read, and this is what I've learned. This is just me talking. I'm sure y'all, everybody has his own way of doing it. It's to establish a plan to prepare to sight read. Sometimes the student isn't given any time to look at it. All he says is look at the key signature, the time signature, and go. But I think most of the time they give you a minute or two, something like that, nowadays, for linesman tryouts to look it over. First thing you do is check the key signature and the time signature. Always. That's just a written law. Then you scan each line hurriedly, not to see how the rhythm goes, but to look for any major tricks. Look for any retards, any fermatas, anything tricky. Not the rhythms, nothing, just tricky stuff. DC, alfine, time signature change, key change, all that. After you spot those, then you go back and you start your foot very slowly, but you got to go pretty fast to get through that minute. You probably got about a minute and a half left after you do that, maybe 2 minutes. Anyway, and go through that, fingering it on your horn, no matter what instrument you're playing, whatever you do, fingering with it slowly, counting it, and when you get to those tricks, they'll pop in your head and say, maybe I'll remember that when I get to it. You see those tricks as you go by for the second time. Then, when you for the brass players mostly, if they'll let you play your first note, some you could ask them, if you're a kid, ask them if it's okay if I play my first note to make sure I'm on the right pitch, or my first interval, if it's some weird interval. If they say no, then that's okay, but if they let you do it, find your first two notes. It's so important to start on the right note, otherwise you ruin everything from there on down. The first measure is probably the most important one. Okay, then you start your foot and you play. Now, another thing that you can do, if you have something that's exceptionally hard in the piece, like a bunch of rhythm, 16th notes and stuff, it may be kind of hard, you might want to take that, tell them to teach them to look at that measure and see what they can play, like da 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 da, whatever it is. Da 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 da. All right, maybe the first measure of the whole piece is 2 half notes. Whether you have a tendency you really want to go fast because it's easy, but what you do is you find that hardest measure, get your tempo on it, and then go to that easy measure and do it that way. Boom, boom, da 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 da. It's much better to play slow and get more notes right than to try to play fast. Fast kills more tryouts and sight reading. That reminds me, I still want to tell that story. There's a band I know, I'm not going to say who it is, I wouldn't say in 100 years. They played a concert right before concert contest. They were going the next day. They always passed out one number to sight read in front of an audience to give them the pressure of doing this. Have you ever heard of this? Some of y'all are shaking your heads like you do. They'd put one number that the band, and they'd tell the audience that we've never seen this number before, and I'm going to go through it with the kids, just like we do at contests. I'm going to spend 2 minutes looking at it myself, 3 minutes talking to the band, and then we're going to perform it for the first time ever. All right, so they did that on that program, the concert. They went to contest the next day. They went to the sight reading room. The music's all turned over. They told the director to look at his part. He turned it up and looked at it. He looked at the kids. He looked back down. He went through it. Then he said, okay, y'all turn your music over. They turned it over. They were looking at each other. It was the number that they had sight read on. Have you heard the story? Anybody heard it? Because I don't want to tell you if you know who it is. I don't want to. Anyway, they made a 2 on it. It's a friend of mine, by the way, that did that. So he's gotten joked enough about it already. I'm not going to mention his name. I don't know whether they still have this at contests or not, but how important sight reading is, that they used not to give you a concert rating any higher, but one step higher than you made on sight reading. Do they still do this? In other words, you could make, way back, you could make a 1 on concert and a 4 on sight reading. It was okay. It's okay. You're a good band director. You got all of that. But it's not true. You're not teaching them anything but 3 numbers. So what they did, they made a law and a rule that you could only get 1 division higher than you do on sight reading. So if you made a 1 in concert and you got a 3 in sight reading, they'd bring it down to a 2 in concert. So they made everybody get off their butt and learn how to sight read. It really helped. It really did. I don't know if they still do that or not. I got a little thing on syncopation. A lot of people have trouble with syncopation. I have another one on dotted quarter note studies. A lot of people have that. Another thing on 16th note studies, 4 16th notes. There's only 5 ways you can do 16th notes. Either da 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 da, tie the first 2, da 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 da, tie the last 2, da 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 da, tie the middle 2, da 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 da, tie the first 3, da da da, tie the last 3, da da da. That's the only way you can do 16th notes. Once the kid sees that, and you write out by the side of it how I did it. I wrote it on the left like it is, and on the right how it's printed. It's the same way. Anyway, that's another thing. Let's see. I'm trying to change your life in 30 minutes, folks. On trumpet, a lot of times you hear people talk about pedal tones, that if you can learn pedal tones, that it helps your high range. But I don't know whether that's right or not. But anyway, I've got a thing on learning pedal tones, how you can get all the way down to way down. And it does open up your throat and help you get there. Warm up, buzzing your lips. I wrote out a thing, all this is just for buzzing. This came about by me driving back from Atlanta one time, from Atlanta to Mississippi, 7 or 8 hours. I had a mouthpiece in my hand. I buzzed the entire route, except to stop for a pit stop every now and then, or a Coke or something. But I buzzed the whole time. Never high, just all kinds of stuff. I wrote down most of it here. The next day, when I woke up, I didn't think about it. I picked up my horn and played. Whew, man, I could play so high, it was unbelievable. And so strong, and so long time. And I'm sure this would work maybe on all the instruments. I know it did for me. Mouthpieces and all that. He had a friend one time asked me about mouthpieces. Well, I'm not the person to ask about mouthpieces. You know, we all start on a 7C on cornet, HS star, 8.5 1L, tuba, whatever y'all got. Anyway, I used to have a kit, Bach kit of mouthpieces with all the different sizes, baritones, horns, trumpet, everything. And I carried it around with me and had 5 horns in the car. That's how I started bands. One of the local music stores gave me a sax, clarinet, flute, trombone, and a cornet. I had them in the trunk of my car all the time. And I'd go into a class, I'd start a band, and I'd talk to them about getting the band started at a school, and they would say, well, how much is it going to cost? What kind of salary you want? And I said, I don't want any salary. And they'd look like this, and I said, okay, what's the plan? And I said, I just need you to buy me some music stands and maybe a couple of horns that we can't afford, kids can't afford. And I'm charging tuition. Meet 2 days a week, an hour each time. And they said, okay, we'll try that. So we did that. At one point, I had 6 bands at one time. I was doing 2-day, Monday, a couple of them Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday, going from band to band, and collecting all kinds of money, checks, small checks. When I was teaching at Clinton, and one of my students is back here. He's probably telling the stories about me right now. Anyway, in one time I had 96 private students a week, and where that money went, I have no clue. I've thought about that so many times. I have no idea. I didn't buy a car. I had a studio downtown at Worldized Music Store on Capitol Street. I taught all day Saturday from 9, and I taught all through the holidays. Everything. Mamas were out there pushing their cars out in the snow trying to get to the lessons and get out, pull off the curb with their kids. They were taking naps out there. I could see them down in the thing. And of course, I took off, Christmas and New Year and all that stuff. But I mean, I taught all during the holidays when they were out of school, and they came religiously. It was amazing. And I can say this is hard to believe too. Out of 65 years of teaching, I have only lost $75, and that was from a secretary at one of the schools I taught, who left the school one night and moved to Baton Rouge without anybody knowing it. And ain't that unbelievable? That shows you that parents will pay for their kids when they only put alcohol on the table, maybe, I don't know, whatever. But it's just been a really unbelievable ride. And okay, breathing. I had a student at the Clinton who was a band director, or was later on, who was a trumpet player and played so nervous as he could be. You know what I'm talking about? You would if I said his name. Anyway, he was uncontrollable, his nerves. He could be by himself in a practice room. He was nervous there. So we did a thing I had heard somebody said, where you take a clock with a second hand, like the clock back there. The second hand's not moving. Anyway. Anyway, you breathe in for 15 seconds, slowly and steadily. You don't take a breath and hold it anywhere in there. You just steep it in for 15 seconds. Then you let it out for 15 seconds, all the way. Then you do this again. So you're taking 2 breaths a minute. So you try to go for 5 minutes, and you've only taken 10 breaths. Or this theory came from the study of whales, how they go down and their heartbeat go slows down, and they could just stay down forever. And this really, really worked. He was drum major of the band. You don't know who I'm talking about, do you? He went up to Batesville or somewhere up north, the band director. Anyway, Donnie, sound familiar? Anyway, he made Lions Band that year, and it was incredible. Let's see what else. Double tonguing, triple tonguing. Do y'all know how to do that? How you teach it? The Arbor book says taka 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 taka, or flute tiki 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 tiki. I don't do that. Not that I'm right, but I've had very success by going da ga da ga da ga da with the throat open, da ga da ga da ga da ga da ga. The faster you go, it sounds short. Everybody hears like da tika 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 da. Sounds better to me. The most important thing about playing is your sound. That's the most important thing on any instrument. Sound. I don't care how you can play, how fast you can play, how low you can play, how long you can play. If it doesn't sound good, it's not good. You can impress somebody screaming these high notes out, but when you play, listen to them play, sound like they're playing on a flat dime or something, you know. And there's certain mouthpieces that help your range, and that's good. That's not bad. But if you're a lead trumpet player in a jazz band, you may want to use something that makes your lip a little bit easier. How many of y'all have ever heard of Bobby Shew, S-H-E-W? Bobby Shew. Incredible jazz player, incredible teacher. If y'all are looking, both look over the computer, Bobby Shew, S-H-E-W. We've had him here in Mississippi about 2 or 3 times. He's been down to LSU a few times. He was supposed to have been in Grenada the 1st of May, but he had a hip replacement and he couldn't come. It made him sick because he's really good. He's developed this thing called a wedge, where he takes in a breath. He does about 6 things this quick, and he's done 6 things, and he explains it all. He's got them all written out and shows you what all he does. And it's so fast you don't even know he's doing it. And he can just scream double C's. Doc Severs is taken from him to help his range. Lots of symphonic players take lessons from him. All the Harry Connick Jr.'s lead trumpet players. Every screamer band you've ever heard player has had lessons from Bobby Sheep. He's an incredible teacher. Anyway, the double tongue and triple tongue, I was on that. Most of the time, the ga, I say ga, is weak. So instead of going taka, 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 have them accent the ga first and go slow. Da, ga, da, ga, da, ga, da, ga. That helps them get used to the ga. They can say da, 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 ga, 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 da, da. You try to make them sound as much alike as you can. That's what you want. You want the ga to sound like the. By the way, you can double tongue on clarinet too. I never could work that out. But this guy that's in the symphony is unbelievable. I guess he's still here. I don't know. It's unbelievable how fast he can tongue. All right, I know you're bored to death. All right, you know when you're teaching kids, you get 2/4 time, 3/4 time, 4/4 time. When they look at 6/8, they think it's something from China or something, or anything with an 8. I've got a thing down here at the bottom. It's 3/8, 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8. And I play it for the kids. I'm trying to get them used to seeing this. All right, we do it in 3. Da 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 da, so forth. Now let's do it in 6. Da 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 da. All right, let's do it in 9. Da 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 da. Big difference. 12. Da 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 da. They say this all sounds the same. That's true. The only difference is the bar lines in different places. It's the only difference. So then you teach them to do it in 1, 3 and 1, 6 and 2, 3, 9 and 3, 12 and 4, and they catch on so fast. But until you see that that's all the same. I think they had 12/8 time not too long ago on a lines band tryout or something weird, and all the kids just said, "Oh, I can't do that," you know. But you can do it with just that one line of thought right there. That one line can teach you how to handle that. Okay. Here's the thing we call Tarzan's warm up. Starts low and builds up your embouchure. If you keep your embouchure the same, and it goes on up to your really high notes. Then for sight reading, I have the kids play this. It's got lots of stuff in it. It doesn't have any key changes in it, but it's a lot of stuff they can do. It's written for 2 parts. They can do the top part, and then come by and do the bottom part. Then you can have them play duets. It's the same thing. I got it for treble, bass clef. It's all in there. I know I've confused you all, but like I said, the more I talk, the less I learn. I learn more from y'all, really.
I've got one question in wrapping up, Mr. Hill, that I.
Let me sit down here, man.
Both Ms. Lance and Mr. Wilson have mentioned to me through the years that as they were auditioning students at Ole Miss and Mississippi State as prospective students, and it would be a trumpet or brass player in general, but we'll talk trumpet in particular, that would have the most beautiful tones. They would always ask them, well, who do you take private lessons? And most of the time his answer is yes. Well, who do you study with? Well, the answer is right here. So in 2 minutes, what could you tell us about what you tell about what's going on up here to So now I feel like a fool, right?
His friend asked me that too. Like, what mouthpiece do you use? My idea of tone is an extension of your body. Everybody's body's different. Everybody has a tone that would be different. So what you need to do is find some tone that you really like that sort of vibrates with your mentality or whatever, but you like it. You know it's a good, clear, open sound, and get a mouthpiece that can produce that, whatever that is. I don't care. Just pick it up and try it. Doesn't matter what it is. I couldn't begin to tell you right now what mouthpiece I use. I've got 6 or 7 mouthpieces I like. I know I went from the 7C like everybody else does. Bobby Hughes says that's a mistake to start kids on the 7C because everybody's lips different. Everybody's mouth is different. That's just an easy way to say, okay, you got a 7C mouthpiece. And then we're going to go to a 3C to get a big sound. There's lots of mouthpieces, but the main thing is to find what you like to hear yourself for you in your playing, whether it's a mouthpiece or something. Years ago, you could go in a music store. I'll tell you how long ago this was. Take your clarinet in there, open up a brand new box of reeds, try out every one of them, and keep the ones you like, put the rest of them back in the box and turn it back in. This is true. This is true. You can do it with mouthpieces. You can pick up any saxophone mouthpiece, get the mouthpiece you like, put the rest of them back in the box. Can't do that anymore. I feel sorry for y'all. Embouchure. I knew you were going to say that. Embouchure. Man, there's so many things you can say about embouchure. If you really want a clinic on embouchures, write on your computer, which I never ever had when I was growing up and learning. iPhone, we didn't have any of that stuff. You can find anything you want to know about embouchures. But most of the time, it's by these guys who can scream, and they can tell you how they do it and how they do it, and it may not work at all for you. It's just frustrating to me to listen to these guys play so good, telling you how to do it, and you can't do it. You try to do everything they say do, and it just doesn't work. So my idea is you just play the best you can and like what you do, and forget what you can't do, and be happy.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Thank you for what you've done for the students and bands in Mississippi. And thank you for being here today. And thank you for the skill set of information that you've given us all here today. Let's have one more round of applause for Mr. Sonny Hill. Thank you.